Should Joey B win MVP? Plus, Jamar Chase's quest for the Triple Crown, the toughest man in football, and another primetime matchup on the road. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He is Andrew Fox Miller. Happy New Year. That's right. Happy New Year. We don't take any days off, Andrew. And that's why this New Year's Eve, we are spending it together. We are spending it with you here on Enter the Jungle. We are brought to you by Garage Beer, proudly part of the Big Play Network. You can catch us weekly on the FanDuel Sports Network and every single Tuesday at 8 Eastern, even on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, doesn't matter, right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Search us on YouTube and find us there. And Andrew, let's dive into it because Joe Burrow has 42 touchdown passes. He's completing 69.8% of his passes this season and has thrown for a franchise record 4,641 yards. The touchdown pass is also a Bengals record. And he seems to be getting some MVP love, at least internally. You're about to hear from a few of his teammates in just a second. But when I toss out the idea of Joe Burrow for MVP, what's your initial reaction?
I mean, when we talked about it recently, I felt as though obviously he should be, in my opinion, front runner if they get into the postseason. Regardless as to whether or not they get into the postseason, I think more people should be talking about it. Let's put it that way. I don't think there's enough people talking about it and making strong cases for it because it's right there. You could run with it. There's plenty of story, plenty of narrative, and I think national media, it should be everywhere.
It should be. And here's what annoys me is people making it a team award. I had to think of how I was going to phrase that. And so many do, oh, well, the Bills are so good and they're going to get the 2 seed and Josh Allen is amazing and he very well may win MVP. Or, oh, well, Lamar is so awesome and so are the Ravens and they could win the Super Bowl this year. No doubt. But what does MVP mean? And I always go back to that because I think the Bengals would stink without Joe Burrow. I don't think we would be having a discussion about Jamar Chase for the Triple Crown. I don't think we'd have the discussion about T. Higgins' future and it being worth it to pay him because I think Joe Burrow gets the most out of both of those guys. I think I know he is the reason Zach Taylor is still here in Cincinnati from a few years ago. Joe Burrow saved a lot of people's jobs, right? So when you talk about value, our YouTube channel, Cincinnati Bengals Talk,
Right,
would be if Joe Burrow didn't exist. That's where I think about it. And so I look at it from that perspective and I look at the stats and I think about the Bengals record. And now that they're 8-8 and not 4-8, now that they're in playoff contention and we're not talking about the draft and the offseason and all of the things that need to happen. And they very well could be on the outside looking into the playoff race. But when I think of most valuable player, and then I look at the numbers, and there are a bunch of them, but to me, 40 plus touchdowns, 8 picks, 45 plus 100 yards, those are MVP like numbers, right? He's only the third quarterback to do that. Aaron Rodgers won MVP in 2011. Tom Brady won MVP doing that in 2007. That's the Randy Moss year, for those wondering. And he still has a game to play. These are 16 game numbers. It's like, okay, well, why wouldn't he be being discussed, especially if the defense is as bad as everyone says? Especially if the offensive line stinks, or Zach Taylor's this crappy head coach that everyone's talking about, or the Bengals are this crappy franchise that has a cheap front office that isn't worried about winning and is more worried about the bottom line. Like if even half of those things are true, that's part of Joe Burrow's case. That's the case I would make is, oh, you mean, so poor franchise or a franchise that cries poor, ownership that you question, head coach that you question down the stretch, defensive coordinator that still could be out the door, defense that doesn't have enough playmakers, offensive line that can't block on the interior and can't have a competent run game. Like I could go on and on and on. All of these things that we've said over the past 8, 10, 12, 17 weeks. And you look up and the Bengals are 8-8. There's a path to the playoffs. They've won 4 straight. And Joe Burrow's put up these numbers. To me, that's MVP.
Yeah, you pretty much hit on exactly what I wanted to point out, which is simply that those that are out there, whether you're arguing against it or arguing for it, regardless of your stance, if you're out there and you're pointing that everything around Joe Burrow is awful, fire the coach, not just Zach Taylor. Oh, fire Lou Anarumo, fire Frank Pollock, offensive line, everything you just pointed out. If it's that dire, It's that just inept. Everything around Joe Burrow. Well, then, ooh, guess what? Guess where Burrow is? He's on a pedestal. He is the most valuable player. I don't want to take us off on a little side tangent, but you pointed out that one stat. I just want to point this out. I love when people go wild with their, let's line up all these great statistics. And this isn't to disparage Joe Burrow. I think he absolutely deserves it. I think there's some really good little anecdotal, numbers out there to prove how talented he's been, especially this season. But the one I'm gonna nitpick. Can I nitpick? Am I allowed to do that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right. I think it was NFL and CBS. I don't know where it originated, but I know they put it out there on social media. It was like, okay, quarterbacks, less than 10 interceptions, over 4,500 yards passing, 40 plus touchdowns. You're adding 3 filters to that list. And this is what I love. You see it on broadcast too. You had to throw in the interception thing. I knew there was something there. When I was looking at that stat, I was like, we had to add an extra filter. Why did we do that? And yes, you could sit there and say, look at the 3 quarterbacks that were on this list, Brady, Rodgers, Burrow. But let's change that filter for a second. If we take that and change it to 12 or less even, we're not even going to go much more, 12 or less. Well, now you're adding Mahomes twice, actually, I think 2018, 22, Brady in 21, Peyton Manning in 04 and 13. That's just making it 12 or less. You can climb your way up and it's going to happen more and more. But I will say with that stat, the crazy thing to me is that Burrow's been sacked 44 times this season. No quarterback on that entire list. If you took that entire list, get rid of interceptions, get rid of that entirely. And you've got way more quarterbacks, way more years of this happening. 44 sacks. No one comes close. The next closest quarterback, actually quarterbacks, was Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and each of them were sacked 36 times, and both in 2011. That is insane to me that he's literally getting back up and putting up those numbers.
Yeah, he plays the position a certain way. He's going to take hits. The offensive line is going to give up hits, give up pressures. He's going to extend plays. And so that's part of it, is the style. At the same time, part of it is that's how he's had to play. That's how they're at their best. And that's the other element here when you talk about value and most valuable player. And don't just take our word for it. Here's Jamar Chase, Orlando Brown Jr., and Zach Taylor on Joe Burrow and why he should be the MVP.
I've been said he was MVP last week, so I think him winning this game right here just got him in first place of the race.
He's so important to our success. I think it's loud and clear. He's been the most valuable player, obviously, for us. He's kept us in games. He's won us games. He's done everything he needs to do to go out and win that award, in my opinion, man. And I've obviously been a part of 2 separate MVPs on 2 separate teams, 2 separate years. And, man, I feel like Joe's the best quarterback in football right now and best player in football. He's playing like it.
I don't know that anybody can stand on a field and watch Joe Burrow and say he's not the best player in the world, and then you can transfer that argument to Jamar Chase as well, and you can argue those 2 to death. But the clearest thing I can say is I would not trade Joe Burrow for any player in the universe. And so to me, that's MVP to me.
As far as the MVP goes, Andrew, it's not going to be Joe Burrow. I can confidently say that. I don't expect him to win the award. But I also think people are confused about the most valuable element. And I just look at the way the Bengals are built, the way they do things, the way every single thing runs and funnels through Joe Burrow from beginning of the game to the end of the game. They ask him to extend plays. They ask him to make the right checks, to make the right calls, to audible to get to the right play. Not just sometimes, not just on 3rd and 7, on 1st and 10, on 2nd and 8, on every single play. So on Saturday night against the Steelers, if they run 72 offensive plays, every single time, the weight of each play is on Joe's shoulders. And most of the time he gets it right, of course. And that's why they do that. But there's so much value there that I really, that's what I come back to. These other quarterbacks, they do have some easy buttons, easy things to lean on. The Ravens, obviously, with Derrick Henry. I mean, it's such a natural fit there to have the read option with Lamar and Henry. Lamar deserves a lot of credit for that, right? Because of his skill set. But I do think that is an interesting element to it. The value with Josh Allen. It's very similar to Burrow. I think they put a lot on him. Not as much. They have that run game there. James Cook has been cooking, literally. But you look at it, and to me, the MVP should be those 3 guys in any order. Obviously, we're close with seeing it week in and week out with Joe Burrow. So he would be my MVP.
I agree. The way that they're constructed, to your point, run game is night and day compared to what Bengals are achieving on offense or trying to intend on achieving on offense and defense. I mean, like all the things that people complain about the Bengals, they compare naturally to a division opponent, the successful ones. And being the Ravens, look at the things that they have achieved that the Bengals, they feel are lacking. And through it all, Joe Burrow's putting up those numbers. MVP, man. In our hearts, if nothing else, that's where we are. This is what's going to have to be. Like,
the CBT MVP.
Right. Oh, yeah.
You thought it was going to be you. It's going to be Joe Burrow.
No. Yeah, no.
It's going to be Joe Burrow. Up next, will Jamar Chase win the Triple Crown? And T. Higgins, is he staying? We'll get to that coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien. Happy New Year. And in the new year, will Jamar Chase win the Triple Crown? Well, he's leading the NFL in receptions, yards, and touchdowns going into the final week of the season. He has 117 catches. That's a Bengals record. He broke TJ Hutchinson-Zada's record from 2007 of 112 the other day against the Broncos. He has 1,612 yards, which is nearly 200 more than Jamar's franchise record that he set as a rookie, 1,455 yards. Did it in 16 games, by the way. Also has 16 receiving touchdowns, just one away from tying Carl Pickens for the most receiving touchdowns in a season in Bengals history. This is very simple to me. And I know my good buddy Bengal Jim isn't going to like it. And shout out to him for the helmet behind me, by the way. That's courtesy of Bengal Jim. But 117 catches, 1,612 yards, 16 touchdowns, dominant against the Ravens this year. He's been dominant in all these matchups and made clutch plays, key plays in these tight games. You expect him to do it week in and week out. Jamar Chase is the best receiver in franchise history. I know Isaac was great. I know Chad Johnson was great. All of these guys. Jamar is 24 years old and is doing stuff that no one in team history could have thought of doing. And that includes those guys. I know it's a different game and all of those things, and you can't don't care. Jamar Chase, he wears number one. He is number one. He's the best receiver in team history.
If there are people like Bengal Jim and others out there that are disagreeing with you, let's define best then, James. Are we saying best as in I would have him over any of those players on my team? Or is it I feel as though he's the best? Let's just call it based off what? I mean, it can't be accomplished. I guess to a degree it could be accomplishments. But how are we defining best?
Well, he can be TJ Hutchinson-Zada by lining up in the slot and making the right reads and catch a bunch of passes. He can go outside and run go routes and make deep plays like that. He can turn a 5-yard hitch into a touchdown. He can do everything. He is the best. He's asked to do more. He's asked to move around. Chad wasn't. He's asked to go downfield. TJ wasn't. Isaac went downfield. It was a different game then, but was he doing everything that Jamar is doing and asked to do everything that they asked Jamar to do? The answer is no. Jamar Chase, much like Joe, when you have a flawed roster like this, you really lean on your talent and your elite talent. And your elite talent is Joe and Jamar. There's no one better than them in this offense of what they're trying to do. And so, yeah, they move Jamar around more than any receiver. That's why it's been so hard to contain him this year. And it's because of his football intelligence as well. That part goes unnoticed. We know how strong he is, big he is, how he breaks tackles, all of those things. So call it what you want. I don't think there's been a receiver in Bengals history that has been asked to do as much as they asked Jamar to do. And he has the most receptions in a season in team history. He has the first and second most yards in a season in team history. He has a 16 touchdown season already, a 13 touchdown season already. Like, we could go on and up and down the list and do whatever you want to do. But I think he's the best. I think if he retires tomorrow, when I put together my Mount Rushmore of Bengals receivers, not best resume, best receiver, I would have Jamar Chase number one.
All right. I like that. I like the if he ends now, because that's where I wanted to go. And I was like, do I want to go down that path? Because then who knows?
Right now.
I mean, you answered
Chad
it. Yeah.
Chad wasn't, and I'm the biggest Chad fan. Chad wasn't asked to do this stuff, man.
No.
He wasn't. You go out, line up, win. Right.
Kicked a field goal.
Hey, they may need him on Saturday night. Speaking of receivers, T. Higgins in what could have been his final game at Paycor Stadium. It better not be his final home game at Paycor Stadium. 131 yards, 3 touchdowns, tee time. This is very simple. We'll have plenty of time this offseason to discuss it. Pay him. You better. The pressure's on. The pressure's on, Bengals. You better pay T. Higgins, period.
No doubt. No doubt. What do you predict at where we stand right now in heading into the year 2025? What do you predict that actually the outcome will be? You don't need to back it up with a lot of whatever, but
expectation. The Bengals re-sign T to a long-term deal. Anything less than that is a disappointment.
I'm going to agree with you there. And you said it's simple, but I can keep it simple and just say, look at the facts here. T hires David Mulligetta to represent him, an agent who has a reputation for, one, getting his clients as much guaranteed money as possible, and two, as a result, not working out really any deals with the Bengals. T then he splits with Mulligetta, now represented by Chase's agency. Joe Burrow recently says, I'm confident that we're going to be able to do what it takes to bring T back. So worried about paying T. Higgins wide receiver money? Are we worried about that? Aside from switching agents, T himself even commented on his value, right? Reportedly saying that not necessarily wide receiver 1, but I hope he gets paid. I hope he gets what he wants, but he recognizes that he's playing with what he referred to as, if not the best, one of the best quarterbacks, and if not the best, one of the best wide receivers. And all those things adding up, I mean, either way, Riley Moss does not want T. Higgins in his division. Let's just put, we don't want that.
No doubt. Didi Kikabwala was the one that reported that, said, quote,
yes.
T. Higgins told me last week that being paid as a wide receiver 1 is not necessarily his number 1 motivator. I'm playing with, if not the best, one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best, one of the best wide receivers. That opens things up for me. Yeah, T, you clearly want to stay. Joe wants you. Bengals front office, pressure's on you. Keep T in town. Will it be tea time on Saturday night? The Bengals certainly need to get a win. Saturday night, they're going to make some history. Win, lose, or draw, Andrew. And it's kind of the short end of the stick. We'll get to that coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He's Andrew Fox Miller. It is Bengals. It is Steelers on Saturday night as the Bengals try to keep their season alive. If they win, they'll improve to 9-8 on the year. It'll be their 4th straight season with a winning record, and they'll keep their playoff chances alive. Now, they need the Chiefs to upset the Broncos. The Chiefs expected to rest multiple players this week. That game on Sunday at 4:25. They also need the Jets to beat the Dolphins on Sunday at 4:25. But it only matters, Andrew, if they handle business on Saturday night, and they're being asked to do something that no other team in NFL history has had to do. The Bengals will play their 5th road primetime game on Saturday night. That's the most for any team in NFL history. It will be their 6th primetime game. They've only had one at home this year, that week 3 matchup against the Commanders. They were flexed out of Thursday night football because the Browns stink a few weeks back. And so that was a 1:00 Sunday game. And so 5 road primetime games. The Bengals are 2-2 with wins over the Giants and Cowboys on the road primetime so far this season. They'll try to make it 3-2 on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, obviously schedule makers know what they're doing here. Bengals can't control the outcome of either of those games. They can control their primetime game on Saturday nearly 24 hours before both games are going to be taking place. So all we can say is this. Hey, here we are, week 18, not one regular season game where the team wasn't playing for something. So I guess we could count our blessings there. By the way, I should point out the Chiefs, assuming Carson Wentz is at quarterback for the Chiefs, Bengals fans should know that, like, Wentz, he has a charity, he has a foundation out there. You could Google it. AO1 audience of 1. I'm just saying, if he ends up beating the Broncos and he's a big reason, what do we do? Like, it's like the Dalton and Buffalo scenario. Let's everybody donate $11 to his foundation. Just a thought. We'll throw it out there.
Speaking of Buffalo, who knows? Maybe Tyrod Taylor will start for the Jets. Regardless, you're rooting for Aaron Rodgers, Tyrod Taylor, Carson Wentz. You need those 3 guys to ball out on Sunday, but it only matters if the Bengals do something that no team has been asked to do. Go on the road for a 5th time in prime time and handle business against the Pittsburgh Steelers. One reason why they might be able to do so is because they have the toughest man in football on their team. And yeah, that might be Joe Burrow, or that might be Ted Karras, or that might be insert whoever you want. But there's a real tough guy that deserves credit for what he did and what he's going to do this week. We'll get to him coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Foxmiller. I'm James Rapien. And Andrew, I think the toughest man in football resides in Cincinnati. And you can make the case it's Joe Burrow, and it's rightfully so. You can make the case that it's some of these other guys that have played through injury this year. I'm going to make the case for Orlando Brown Jr., who's 6'8", 350 pounds, and played on a broken fibula. It's broken in 2 spots. Played the Broncos. The broken fibula has not healed. And so he's waiting on that to heal, playing, expects to play this week as well. Didn't give up a pressure against the Broncos. And so the Bengals Pro Bowl left tackle showing up big, playing through the pain, just tough. You want to talk tough? He's tough.
We saw a penalty, some mental error, like getting back in, a little rusty there. But physically, the fact that he went in and did that, like, I know it doesn't qualify. Can we make an exception? Like, let's just give Burrow MVP and comeback player of the year to Orlando Brown Jr. Let's just call it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunately probably what Burrow's going to win. But yeah, I think Orlando, he's playing so great. He's such a big part of this team. And it's happened pretty quickly, and they need him. I mean, if they're going to go on any kind of run, if they're going to beat Pittsburgh, they need him. And so hopefully Orlando Brown Jr. can look like he did against the Broncos again on Saturday night against the Steelers. Make sure that you check us out, Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, and Happy New Year. For Andrew Foxmiller, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching.